welcome to our content session for the English language. So if you've been part of these sessions, at least for the last couple of sessions, you know that we've been focusing on spot the error, right? We've been looking at specific error types. I think we've covered about 8 error types to be precise. Yeah, so we're going to continue and focus on the other error types. The objective being that we are familiar with as many error types as possible, so we know what to look for, right? So I'm going to take I mean, you know the drill if you've been a part of the earlier sessions, right? So we'll go with that. You can always feel free, and you know that in the process you're going to learn a lot of basic rules or certain things that you need to keep in mind, right? So we'll get started. Hari was unhappy that he would not attend the wedding of his friend yesterday. So there's the question right in front of us, and we'll have to identify which of those parts have the error. So in the context again, it's extremely important for us to understand meaning. Here we're talking about this person was not able to attend his friend's wedding, right? It's more of a what meaning is this context bringing? I mean, it's not a very impossible task, right? Maybe he just missed it for whatever reason, right? So here it's bringing out the meaning of him being able to attend the wedding or not. That's about it, right? We're talking about an ability, right? Whether he was able to attend it or not. So Hari was unhappy that he would not attend the wedding of his friend, and just by me explaining, saying the context is bringing out the meaning of ability, immediately what comes to your mind? The meaning that the context is talking about is ability. So as soon as I say that, the concept that should come to your mind is about modals, right? Modal verbs, because modal verbs express ability, certainty, something that should be done, right? Like it's the right thing to do, right? So having said that, where do you think the error is? Obviously, the only modal that is there is in part B, would, right? And we all know that would is the past tense of will. And I know will as a modal expresses the meaning of certainty, which means here I don't need the meaning of certainty. The meaning that I need in the context is ability. So what should I replace would with? Which modal brings out the meaning of ability? I need to replace would with could. Hari was unhappy that he could not attend the wedding and not would not attend the wedding, right? So obviously this is an error pertaining to modal. Would is the past tense of will, and the meaning that would expresses is certainty, or when you're bringing in a hypothetical condition, and that's not the case here. So the error is in part B. We replace would with could. Yeah, are you following? Let's move to the next one. Let's see if you're able to identify that a little faster than this. I told you that he ought to come today. I told you that he ought to come today. What's the meaning of ought to? Ought to is another modal, right? When somebody says you ought to do this, right? You ought to take daily tests in order for you to practice time, right? Practice or scale or master time management. You ought to take tests. So what do I mean by that? When I say you ought to do something, I'm saying it's something that you have to do, right? It's the right thing to do. It's the way to go, right? You ought to have done this. You should have done this. Almost brings in the same meaning of it's the right thing to do. So in the context, is that the meaning that we need? Look at the meaning that the context is saying. I told you that he ought to come today. I told you. If I have to say that in Telugu, it'll be like, Nen cheppen kada, he'll come, right? I actually gave the answer. Or, na sonnella. So when that expression, I told you, is an expression, right? Is the clue for us. I told you that do I need ought to meaning, or what meaning do I need? Ought to means we just said, compulsory, okay, I'll take that. Or have to do it, right? Or should do it because it's the right thing to do, right? So, but the context, what meaning do I need? It's almost like this person was very sure, right? It's almost like this person was very sure that this person is going to come today, which means the meaning, context meaning is what? Certainty, right? So if the context meaning is certainty, what modal expresses certainty meaning? I told you that he, we just saw in the previous question, I told you that he would come today, right? Or he will come today. We just saw, right? In the previous question, remember we saw certainty meaning is will, yeah? So I told you, so you replace, so again the error is in part B where you replace ought to with I told you that he would come today, right? I told you that he would come today. Are you guys following? So, which means the trick is for us to know the meaning that each modal expresses in a context. First, I need to understand what the context meaning is and then see, hey, is this the right modal in this context? Yeah? Let's do a couple of more. I will contact you when you will come. I will contact you when you will come. Is there an error in this context? There is. Will as a modal is repeated in this context, right? It comes in part A as well as part B. Well, that definitely is unnecessary. Either you can say, I will contact you. You have to have I will there, right? Because again, will is bringing, what is the context meaning here? I will contact you. Surely, certainty, don't worry about it. I will do this, right? It's almost like promising them. I'm saying this, I will do this, right? So, will as a modal is correct in part A, but I don't need that will repeated again in part B, right? It's unnecessary. I will contact you when you come. When you come, I will contact you. Even if I, kind of move the phrases around, I don't need will there in the second part, right? When you come, I will contact you. Yeah. So just like how when we looked at prepositions, we saw there are only three types of errors pertaining to prepositions. Either an incorrect preposition, or a missing preposition, or an unnecessary preposition. And the same applies to conjunctions as well. And the same can apply to modals as well, right? So the first two example sentences that we saw, they were incorrect modals because it was not in line with the meaning of the context. This one is an unnecessary modal. I don't need this modal here. So the error is in part B, I will contact you when you come, right? That's it. That's where the error is, not in A. Because you need will there, because the context meaning is certainly I will contact you. Don't worry, surely I will contact you. I'm promising you I will contact you, right? So all we have to do is delete will here in part B. Let's look at one more. Be careful lest the sickness may take a bad shape. Be careful lest the sickness may take a bad shape. Where do you think the error is? So the clue here for us, the clue word is the word lest. Okay, are you familiar with this word? Maybe some of you don't know the meaning of this word, right? When you say something is lest, you're referring to, in order to prevent any possibility that something will happen. Let me just put that down here, right? So let's look at an example sentences. If I say, so what do I mean by this? So I'm saying they were afraid to complain about the noise lest they annoyed the neighbors. So they didn't want to annoy the neighbors. In order to prevent that, right? In order to prevent the possibility of annoying the neighbors, they were afraid to complain. They did not complain basically, right? So you understand the meaning of lest, right? So in the context again, be careful lest the sickness may take a bad shape. Be careful lest the sickness may take a bad shape. Meaning, like, take care so that, you can prevent the possibility of you or the sickness becoming worse. Are you following? So, in the context, if at all you have to change anything, what will you change? Let's look at another context. I can say, Das worried lest she should be late, right? Again, lest comes here. So in order to prevent the possibility of this person, that there's a possibility of this person coming late, Das was worried, right? But if you look at the construction, lest is usually followed by the modal should or no modal at all, right? If at all, if there's a modal that follows lest, it will always be should and not may to might, Anil, right? So that's why I put another example of lest so that you understand the construction. Mostly lest is followed by should. But if you ask me technically, no modal should follow lest because that itself completes the meaning. I don't need a should. In fact, if you ask me, I would say should is an unnecessary modal there because lest brings out the required meaning and I don't need a should there again. This is my opinion, but you will come across constructions where lest is followed by should as well, and that's accepted, right? It's grammatically correct, right? It's just that if I have to have a discussion with you, I would root for lest appearing as it is and nothing following, but you know how English is and how grammar is and how things keep changing, right? So maybe down the line, lest will not follow should, who knows? Okay, but for now, I'm just saying both the constructions are acceptable where lest appears as it is in our first example or lest is followed by should but not any other modal. So which means obviously the error is in part C where I remove may, right? And I can add a should. Be careful lest the sickness should take a bad shape. I can either do that as per my second construction right here, or I can just say be careful lest the sickness takes a bad shape, right? If I'm not using any modal, obviously we're talking about a singular subject, so I need a singular verb, so take becomes takes. Yeah? So either ways the error is in part C. Following? So far we've looked at incorrect modals, we've looked at an unnecessary modal. In this example, we've looked at clue words in terms of construction, right? So in certain constructions, what modal should follow? What is the right modal? Or do we need a modal at all? Right? That's what we looked at in the fourth one. So just to summarize errors pertaining to modals, let's look at one more. He proposes that the government will hold an inquiry. He proposes that the government will hold an inquiry. Where do you think the error is? Is there a clue word in the context that is helping us? Why do you want to change will to should? Any clue word in the context? Okay. Yes, proposes, right? That's our clue word. Very right. So when I'm proposing something, which means I'm offering a suggestion, right? When I'm offering a suggestion, which means I'm asking people to consider it. So if I'm asking people to consider my suggestion, how can I use will, which is a modal that expresses surety or certainty? Incorrect, right? So I'm saying he proposes that the government should, right? I believe when you're offering something, when you're giving a suggestion or an advice, you believe that it is the right thing to do, right? So which means I need a modal which expresses what is the right thing to do. You should pay your taxes. You should follow traffic rules. You should help the needy, right? So what's the right thing to do? So that's the meaning that the context is bringing in. Proposes being our clue word. Obviously, I can't have will as a modal. So the error, yes, is in part C, no doubt. You replace will with should, right? Just to look at another example sentence where we have propose followed by should. So I can say they proposed that political strikes should be made illegal. Yeah, just so we understand the context, right? So when you're proposing something, not necessarily that every time you have propose it will be followed by should. Propose can come as it is without a modal following, just like lest, right? But if at all I have to use a modal, should would be the right modal, right? So in the last example for modals, what we saw is there are clue words in the context which can help us identify again if this is the right modal or not, right? So there are context clues that we keep applying, right? Context clues is a great strategy or a tip, not just for fill in the blanks or close passage, even for spot the error, right? That's the beauty of all these little concepts that we need to master. So I also wanted to highlight something with respect to what other clue words do we have in order to get the right modal, right? Propose is one, but I also wanted to share another tip, something that is extremely important. I think you should know this. Let me just put it down here. So when do I have this should, right? Followed, propose is not the only word. Another word is suggest, bringing in the same meaning, right? So I could say his wife suggested that he should start a bakery, right? And if you notice the constructions, just for you to understand construction wise, okay, this is a small tip. Proposed that or suggested that, this entire phrase, if you take, usually should is the one that follows phrases like this, right? That clauses. Proposed that, suggested that. So when you have proposed that, suggested that, you can close your eyes and know that the modal that has to follow these sort of phrases is only should. Yeah, that's something that you can keep in mind. And this is especially in writing, because obviously people are not grammatically accurate when they speak, right? So very formal writing, I would say. Yeah, so proposed that, should. Suggested that, should. That's the only modal. There we go, we've done that. Let's move to our next error type. So that was modals for you. Let's move to our next error type. If I would have been there, I certainly would have taken care of the problem. As soon as you read the sentence, what's the concept that comes to mind for you in terms of error type? What are we talking about here? Obviously, we're referring to if conditionals, right? Absolutely. So where is the error? In terms of form, what conditional is this? Can somebody identify what conditional this is? Would have taken. Would have plus past participle. Which condition is this? Conditional is this? If conditionals, first, second or third? Which one is it? That's my question. It's a third conditional. So what is the form for the third conditional? If plus the first clause is past perfect. But in A, if you notice, it has the second clause form, would have, which obviously is incorrect. I need to change that to past perfect. So what will I change here in part A? What will become of part A? The error is undoubtedly in part A, and if the second clause is in line with what is needed, because I have would have plus the past participle is the third form of take, right? Take, took, taken. Verb 1, verb 2, verb 3. And for my past participle, I always take the third verb. So that is correct. So which means I only have to change part A. How do I change if I would have to past perfect? If I had been there, right? So I don't need would have. If I had been there, I certainly would have taken care of the problem. So the error is in part A and I need to change. I don't need would have again, because we're talking about the third if conditional form here, and the third if conditional form is this, right? Immediately what you need to do is you need to be familiar with the forms, right? Whether it's first conditional, second conditional or third conditional, I need to know the form. So if I know the form in fact should be something that you know by heart. Yeah, let's move to the next one. If I would have had more time, I would have prepared a much more detailed report. So this one shouldn't be difficult for you. We just saw something on the same lines in our first example. So can you quickly identify where the error is? It's the same concept, right? We again talking about the third conditional form, because I have the second clause which has would have plus the past participle which is prepared, which means again I need if plus past perfect, and the past perfect form of have is had, right? If I had more time. So the error again is in part A. I would have prepared a much more detailed report. Again, we're talking about a third conditional, and this is the form. Quite easy. And most of us have a problem with this had expression, right? It seems funny, it seems grammatically incorrect, but this is the right construction, because had is nothing but, it's almost like the second had substitutes for another main verb. Yeah, let's look at an example sentence just to explain this to you. I could say, when Raj arrived, everyone had dinner, right? So this had is nothing but where I'm saying, obviously we're talking about, when two actions happen in the past, the first action is always in the past perfect tense, right? That's why it's had. And then the second action is in the simple past tense. So having said that, this had, the second had is basically replacing the main verb. When Raj arrived, everyone had what? Eaten dinner, right? It's substituting this past participle main verb, which is nothing but they had dinner already, which means they ate dinner. They had eaten dinner. That's what it means. So the second had is basically substituting the meaning of the main verb, which is eat. Yeah, so had is nothing but the past perfect tense of have. And this is something so these sort of constructions are correct, grammatically accurate. There's nothing wrong with had coming together. Yeah, can you think of your own example sentence and maybe give me one or two with had now that I've explained it? I'll give you another example. So I can say, before I got here, I had too many chocolates, right? Again, the second had is replacing or substituting the main verb eaten. Before I got here, I had eaten too many chocolates. I had too many chocolates, right? So just to put it in context, so you guys don't get confused. So here again, the error is in part A. If I had more time, I would have prepared a much more detailed report. Let's look at another variation when it comes to if conditional errors. Check this one out. Your employer would have been inclined to favor your request if you would have waited for an occasion when he was less busy. Your employer would have been inclined to favor your request if you would have waited for an occasion when he was less busy. I'm just going to give you 15 seconds again. See if you are able to identify where the error is. So basically, in this context, if you see, they've just shifted the part, right? Because if starts here. If you would have waited for an occasion when he was less busy, your employer would have been inclined to favor your request. So what's happened here is, it's just that they've shifted the first and the second clause, right? That is something that can happen. Construction wise, it's grammatically accurate to do that. Just to highlight this, let me go to the previous sentence. So I can still say, I would have prepared a much more detailed report if I had more time, right? I can switch the entire clauses. The meaning will still be intact. That's what has happened in this particular example context, right? So, which means I still need to identify that the error is not in part A, but the error is actually in part C again, right? Because have been inclined is our second clause, right? Would have been inclined is our second clause. For the first clause, I need if I or you. In this case, the subject is you, so not I. Let's just change that. If you had waited, okay? Past perfect, had waited. If you had waited, past perfect, right? So if you had waited for an occasion when he was less busy, your employer would have been inclined to favor your request. So the error is in part C. So don't get confused when the clauses are interchanged, as in the positions of the clauses change. What do I mean by clause? One complete thought, right? So for example, your employer would have been inclined to favor your request is one clause. Okay. If you would have waited for an occasion when he was less busy is another clause. It's a complete thought. So when the clauses interchange, don't get confused, right? You can't always go by, okay, whenever there is a hypothetical sentence and it starts with if, right, I always have to look at part A being where the error is. No. In this context, it's part C. So you change, you would have waited to if you had waited. Let's move. Had I have been in my boss's position, I would have hung up the phone in the middle of the conversation. Had I have been in my boss's position, I would have hung up the phone in the middle of the conversation. Again, if I look at the second clause, I have would have hung up, right? Which means would have plus past participle. But as per the third conditional form, I need if plus past perfect, right? So what do I change here? The error is in part A. Why? Because sometimes another expression that means the same. So all I need to do is just delete this have here. Had I been, right? Basically, had I been is another way of saying if I had been, where had been is the past perfect tense. If I had been in my boss's position, or had I been in my boss's position, another way of saying this is if I were in my boss's position, right? Are you following? So you will see this other way of how if plus past perfect also takes up the form of had I been, right? So the error is in part A, where you just delete have, had I been in my boss's position, meaning if I had been in my boss's position or if I were in my boss's position, I would have hung up the phone in the middle of the conversation. What I want you guys to always keep in mind is do not deviate from the form, right? You know the form. If plus past perfect, would have plus past participle. That's it. If would have plus past participle is intact in the second clause or in the first clause, wherever it comes, depending on how the sentence is constructed and what they've put first. Like the sentence does not always have to start with if. If can come in the middle also. We just saw the previous example, right? So you need to only look for the form. If the second clause form is correct, would have plus past participle, don't do anything there. You don't have to change anything there, right? But what is incorrect is the first clause. Had I have been, incorrect. Had I been or if I had been, yeah? That's the answer. So the error is in part A. You just delete have and that's about it. So far most of your errors pertaining to if conditionals happens with third conditional form. It's also good to know second conditional, first conditional form also, because you might get errors from that as well. But for the most part, it's from the third conditional, which means all you have to do is just remember the form, yeah, and know other variations to the if plus past perfect, like had I been also is correct. Let's look at this. If I would have come a little earlier, I would have got a glimpse of my beloved teacher. Last one, hopefully you get this right because we've looked at this in detail. So I don't think you should take a lot of time for this question to answer this question. Okay, same thing, easy one. The error is in part A, third conditional form again, because the second conditional is right there. Would have plus past participle got is there, which means I just need a past perfect tense in the first part, which is A, right? I don't need would have again. So what do I change that to? If I had come, right? Past perfect, that's it. I would have got a glimpse of my beloved teacher. So summing up, if conditional errors, especially the third conditional, I need to be familiar or thorough with the form, one. I also need to look out for exchange of clauses. If does not necessarily have to start the sentence, it can come in the second clause as well. So I need to accordingly choose where the error is, right? And the third one, also be familiar with the other expression, had I done this or had I been there, right? That's also another way of saying if I had. It takes up the same form as if plus past perfect. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. We're going to move to the next error type. You tell me what this error type is. This is your question. The outcome of GST in terms of tax revenue and the ability of the government to push forth the disinvestment program will be important ingredients of the final picture. Where do you think the error is? You may not know the concept, but you might identify which part sounds awkward or funny. So which is that part is my question. So this is an easy one, right? Because obviously, if you look at the context, right, the outcome of GST in terms of tax revenue and the ability of the government to do something, right? Ability being your clue word. I have the ability to do this. I have the ability not to do this, right? Ability being the clue word. Obviously, I need a 2 plus verb form, which is nothing but the infinitive, right? And this verb is always verb 1, which means pushed is incorrect. That's not verb 1, right? It's verb 2 or verb 3. Push, pushed, pushed, right? Verb 1, verb 2, verb 3. Which means if it's an infinitive form, I always need the first verb. So that's why the error is in part B. And I change pushed to push. But pushed forth as an expression or a phrase. Have you heard of pushed back and forth? That's another phrase, right? For you to be familiar with. So when you have back and forth as a term or as a phrase, you know the word that precedes it is pushed. Someone can push you back and forth. Someone can be pushed back and forth, right? That's just another expression that it's good to know. If there is an error around that, you'll be able to identify it quickly. But in our context, we need the infinitive form, 2 plus verb 1 form. So obviously the error is in part B. Let's look at another one. So higher demand for basmati rice from Iran and West Asia is helping farmers in Punjab and Haryana gets good price for their produce this year. Higher demand for basmati from Iran and West Asia is helping farmers in Punjab and Haryana gets good price for their produce this year. Where is the error? As soon as you read it, you know where the error is. The error is in part C, right? Obviously. Because why? You have another helping, the clue word there. Higher demand for basmati from Iran and West Asia is helping farmers in Punjab and Haryana to do something, right? He is helping me so that I can do something. He's helping me to do something. He's helping me to achieve something, right? So, obviously, I need to get and not gets. Even if I don't know that use, I know that as soon as I read the sentence, I know something is funny in part C, right? It's awkward in construction. Let's see if you crack this. Denial of wages forced scientists and teachers at the agriculture universities throughout the country on going on a strike, crippling crucial research that could help the state of agriculture in the country. Pretty long sentence, slightly confusing, but if you break it down, let's see if you're able to identify the error. Again, there is a clue word. In our first example, ability was the clue word, and our second example, helping, was the clue word. Let's see if you're able to identify the clue word and identify where the error is in this question. Yes, right? Obviously, the error again is in part C. Forced is my clue word, right? I'm always forced to do something. So denial of wages forced scientists and teachers. So this whole part, at the agriculture universities throughout the country is just the prepositional phrase giving me additional information. If I have to just put this sentence in context, denial of wages forced scientists and teachers to do what? To go on a strike. That's it. Right? That's why the error is in part C. Not on going on, but to go on a strike, crippling crucial research that could help the state of agriculture in the country. So if you notice, all of these errors are obviously pertaining to infinitives, right? 2 plus verb. And for every sentence we have seen, there is some clue word, which means it's more to do with, just set expressions. I am forced to do something. He is helping me to achieve something. I have the ability to do something. So it means I need to look out for these clue words as well whenever I have an issue with, the infinitive form, right? That's the way to go. Let's look at a couple of more in this particular error type and see if you're able to identify. So it's good to know some of these clue words also, right? So because if I have these words in a context, then I can quickly check the verb that is following. Is it in the infinitive form? Ability, helping, forced. There are lots of words like that, right? You just have to look up a lot more construction sentences to identify what those clue words are and what is the usual construction that follows those clue words. Yeah, India is largely perceived to having stronger courtesy prudent government policies and a reasonably high real rate framework. Where is the error? This is not a very difficult one at all, in fact, right? Even if you can't identify the clue word, you know where the error is. So most of you have come back and said B. Yeah, obviously, right? What is our clue word here? What's the clue word? Quickly. Perceived. Yes, right? So perceived meaning if I perceive you to be someone or to be something, which means this is how I view you as, right? That's the meaning. To perceive means to view. So you always, someone is perceived to be something or someone is perceived to be someone, right? Let's look at a context. So if I say, let me just write an example sentence. So I can say, he is a politician who is perceived. He is a politician who is perceived to be, let's say, dissembler. Yeah? He is a politician who is perceived to be. 2 plus, to be a dissembler. Meaning, who's a dissembler? A dissembler is somebody who hides behind a false appearance. Basically, he doesn't reveal his true self. That's a dissembler, right? So he is a politician who is perceived to be a dissembler. So that's our clue. And what we've noticed is there are always these clue words where the infinitive form is what follows, right? Let's do one more for this particular error type. He tried to help, but his friend refused taking his help. Where is the error? Give me the part that has the error and tell me what the clue word is. Simple, that's the way to go. So you're right when you say the error is in part C, no doubt. What is the clue word? The clue word is refused, right? Always somebody is refusing to do something. Let's look at quickly some example sentences. Yeah, so just some random example sentences I've put where refused is followed by the infinitive form. The chairman refused to answer any more questions. We all refused to break the law. I absolutely refused to go there. They refused to give Shri the job. He tried to help, but his friend refused to take his help. Yeah, not taking, but to take. Got it? So that's infinitives for you, where we've looked at almost always, there's a clue word wherein the construction that follows or is the infinitive form. Yeah, perceived, refused, ability, helping, and there are a lot more words than this. We're going to move to the next error type. Let's see if you can identify what this error type is. It is tough to single from a couple of names from among a large number of dedicated and hardworking leaders who have shown the potential to hold the party in good stead in the future. Again, a long sentence. Where do you think the error is? Were you able to identify the error here in this question? Why would you say that? Basically, in the context, what meaning is the context talking about? It is tough to single from a couple of names. So, from a couple of names, from among a large number of dedicated and hardworking leaders. So, which means obviously this entire thing, right? Single from is incorrect. Single out is our expression, right? What is the meaning of single out? Have you heard this phrase? Single someone out. Someone or something out, right? So it's more to do with, obviously out is an adverb. So we know that a verb plus an adverb or a verb plus a preposition is a phrasal verb, right? So it is tough to single out a couple of names from among a large number of dedicated and hardworking leaders. So from this group, it is difficult to single out. What is the meaning of single out? To choose one person from a group for whatever reason, right? Let's look at an example. So I can say, who would you single out as the most promising student of the year, right? So in the context again, we are saying out of all the students, who would you pick? Who would you choose? Right? That's the meaning. The meaning is to choose one person or thing from a group. Obviously for some sort of a special attention, right? So in the example that I gave, we are obviously looking for student of the year. So promising student of the year. So likewise here, yes, the error is in part A, where I replace from with out to bring the phrasal verb single out. And we just saw what the meaning was, right? It is tough to single out a couple of names, to choose a couple of names, to pick a couple of names from among a large number of dedicated and hardworking leaders who have shown the potential to hold the party in good stead in the future. Are you following? Yeah. So which means I need to have been familiar with this particular phrasal verb, single out, or at least the expression of the phrase. To single someone out means to choose, to pick someone from a larger group. So if I was familiar with that, then I would have known that the error is in part A, right? For those of you who don't know, there it is. Let's see if you identify the next one. Indian Oil Corporation may not passing on the entire cost burden of Bharat Stage 4 grade fuel to the consumers, though there will be a marginal increase in price. Where do you think the error is? This is a pretty easy one again. As soon as you read it, you know where the error is, because it sounds funny, it sounds awkward, this particular part. Yes, absolutely, right? Pretty easy. Most of you got it right. Obviously, it's in part A, where another clue for you is obviously this modal may, right? Modals are always followed by the verb one. So I don't need the ing form here. And the right modal verb, the right phrasal verb is pass on, right? So what is the meaning of pass on in the context? What does it mean? Let's look at an example sentence. So I can say, so in this example sentence that I have put down, right, the retailer is forced to pass these extra costs on to the customer. So I know for a fact that, see, another way of, what do I say, holistically learning, as in like a complete picture of learning, is to also quickly learn if that particular phrasal verb is a separable or inseparable phrasal verb, right? Because I think a year back we had some spot the errors based only on this separable or inseparable phrasal verb. So they will give a context and then they will give some options. The spot the error question type was slightly different, and all those spot the errors were based on phrasal verbs. So and the concept that you had to be familiar with is whether this phrasal verb can be broken, as in separated, or not. So I know that pass on is a separable phrasal verb, and I've given an example. So these extra costs is the object which is separating pass on, right? In the context, obviously, so it can come in both ways. I can separate it or it can come together. But what is the meaning? To make someone who is buying something from you pay for the cost of something, right? That's the meaning in this context. But remember, pass on phrasal verb can have different meanings in different contexts, right? So for example, I can even pass like a sickness. I can pass on. If I have cold, I can pass it on to somebody else because cold is contagious, right? That's one meaning. Are you following? So a phrasal verb will have different meanings in different contexts. Or if you're just asking somebody to give you something, hey, can you please pass that on to me? That's another meaning, right? when you please read this message, can you please pass this message on? That's another meaning. So when I'm learning a phrasal verb, I will learn the different meanings of that phrasal verb. I will also learn if that phrasal verb can be separated or it's an inseparable phrasal verb. For example, singled out. I singled this person out. Yes, I can separate single out as well. Right? So it's good to learn holistically that way. So obviously the error is in part A, change passing to pass. That's it. Following? Let's move. She is so beautiful that people turn about to look at her. She is so beautiful that people turn about to look at her. Where is the error? She is so is part A, beautiful that people is part B, turn about to is part C, and look at her is part D. Where do you think the error is? So let's understand the context meaning. No, in the context, what they're saying is, obviously, if some handsome guy or a beautiful girl passes you by, what do? If you're walking and they're passing you, there is a tendency, human nature, to turn about, or what's the right phrasal verb? You turn to see, you turn to check that person out, right? What's the right phrasal verb there? Not turn about, turn around. The phrasal verb that I need is turn around. So what do I mean by turn around? To reverse the direction of something or someone. So in a context like this, right, it's important for you to understand he turned around, as in completely, and understand another factor that you need to keep in mind when you're learning phrasal verbs is, obviously, turn is the main verb, right? And then you have the adverbs or the prepositions associating it with that verb turn, which means I have to learn all the possible phrasal verbs with turn, right? I have turn away, right? Turned away as in, like, somebody was looking at me, staring at me, and I turned away because I thought it was freaking me out, right? Why are they staring at me? So I turned away from their glance. Turn away is one. Turn to, right? I can turn to you for help. Or, turn around, like we just saw now, right? So, which means I also have to learn all the possible phrasal verbs with that verb turn. That's another aspect to it. I was sharing with you earlier what are all the things that you need to do when you're learning phrasal verbs, right? Different meanings. Now, different phrasal verbs with that particular verb. Is it separable or inseparable, right? So, in this context, it's turn around and not turn about. Okay, in fact, I don't think there is a phrasal verb like that. Yeah, it sounds correct maybe because you're familiar with about turn and you think turn about is correct, but it's not. Let's go back to the context. So obviously the error is in part C, where I change about, turn about to turn around. So literally, the meaning of this turn around, I'll give you another example of the same meaning as our given context. So I could say, the girls in front turned around and grinned. Grin is just another way of saying that they were laughing, they were grinning. That's grinning, okay. This is my version of the grin. I'm sure people have different ways of grinning, but yeah, turned around and grinned. But just to give you some other examples of turn around as a phrasal verb with other meanings. Like I said, it's important for us to know that as well. So when you're learning, please make sure you learn it holistically, right? So I'm just going to give you some random examples. Actually, I'll put the context. Can you give me the meaning that turnaround is bringing in this context? Yeah, how about that? Okay, I'll just put some quick example sentences. This is example 1. I'll give you another example. So obviously turnaround is right here. It's a separable phrasal verb. Turn it around, right? It's separated by a pronoun there. Just read the context, understand the meaning, and tell me what do you think turnaround expresses in this context. Example 2, I'm going to write example 3 here. Okay, so I've given you 3 example sentences. Can you tell me what meaning the context expresses in all these 3 example sentences? The first one is, we can produce quality work and turn it around very quickly. So what meaning does turnaround bring in this context? So in the first example, it talks about being able to complete something within a specific time, right? Quickly being our clue word. So have you heard of this expression? The turnaround time, TAT. Turnaround time, the response, right? So when you post a question in the discussion forum, ideally the TAT that you're expecting, the turnaround time for your question to be responded to or answered, you're looking at, within 24 hours, you want your question to be answered, right? Turnaround time. So in the first context, the meaning is to be able to finish something within a specific time period. Turnaround. Second, it was your idea, so don't turn around and say you're too busy. Which means you suggested this idea, boss. Now why are you backing out? So turn around in this context, the second context means what? It means, hey, now you're not being helpful. Now you're changing your mind. You're going back on what you said you will do. This is your idea. So don't turn around and say you're too busy. So don't turn around here, meaning stop being, you cannot suddenly stop being helpful. You can't say that I have nothing to do with this. So basically, when you suggest something and then you just turn around and say, hey, you know what, but I'm not available to implement that idea, then you're not being helpful, right? You surprise people. You only gave that idea. How come you're not available, right? So don't turn around. That's the meaning in the second context. Third one, the 400 million loan will help turn the Russian economy around. What is the meaning that the third context turnaround is expressing? The 400 million loan will help turn the Russian economy around, which means the Russian economy right now is not doing pretty well. It's unsuccessful, but the 400 million is going to help change that situation. So here it's going to turn the unsuccessful situation to a successful situation, right? So do you see how it's important for us to understand that one phrasal verb can have different meanings in different contexts? That's one way to learn phrasal verbs. 2 is, we looked at other phrasal verbs with turn to, turn away, turn around. Yeah, and whether it's separable or inseparable, right? Okay, great. We spent a lot of time here. Let's see if you can identify this one. In my opinion, Balraj is very honest and can be depended. In my opinion, Balraj is very honest and can be depended. Where do you think the error is in the next one? See, in the question again, in my opinion, meaning this is what I feel because I know this person, right? In my opinion, Balraj is very honest. And can. So if you're thinking can is an incorrect modal and that's why the error should be in part B, incorrect. Right? Can is absolutely fine. Where you're saying, I know that this guy has this ability. What ability? That we can depend on him. So where is the error actually then, if not part B? Where else can the error be? Depended to be changed, not changed. You just have to add the preposition on or upon, right, to complete that phrasal verb. So error is in part C, where you say depended on. He can be depended on or he can be depended upon, right? That's the phrasal verb. Let's look at a context. Your future depends on how well you do in these exams, right? That's my phrasal verb, depend on or depended upon. So that is where the error is. The preposition is missing. Okay. One last one, with respect to phrasal verbs. Let's see if you're able to identify it. A nationwide survey has brought up an interesting finding regarding infant mortality rate in China. Where do you think the error is? Where do you think the error is in this one, guys? We're still on phrasal verbs, so pretty easy to identify which part has the error. So let's quickly do this. A nationwide survey has not brought up, because we're talking about an interesting finding, which means it has the context meaning is that the survey has revealed something, right? So which means I need a phrasal verb which brings out the meaning of revealed. But brought up means what? To bring up something means to raise, na? Bring up as a phrasal verb, which means what? To look after or to raise, right? Yes, the right word is brought out. The right phrasal verb is brought out, which means revealed, right? Yeah, so that's where the error is. The error is in part A, where we're saying, hey, it's not brought up, but it's brought out, right? You bring out the best or the worst in someone. Just to put this in context, the wine really brings out the spicy flavor of the meat. To bring out means to make something or someone show a quality that they have, or to reveal something. Yeah, clear? So that was errors pertaining to phrasal verbs. A lot for us to chew on when it comes to phrasal verbs. I hope you understood the idiomatic phrase to chew on means to think, to invest, to explore, right? To spend more time analyzing phrasal verbs. So I've already given you how to approach phrasal verbs. So you will be able to identify errors like incorrect phrasal verbs or not in the right form, like pass on and not passing on, right? Which form is required for a phrasal verb? It's always the verb 1. Brought is not verb 1, it's verb 3. Bring, brought. So I take that back. But what I'm trying to say is understand the form in which it comes, right? It can be a present tense form, it can be a past tense form, it can also be a continuous tense form, depending on the context. Yeah. So we've looked at what? 4 error types actually so far, right? We started off with modals, then we moved to if conditionals, then we looked at infinitives, and here we are with phrasal verbs, right? And like I say, don't just limit your learning to just this session. Whatever we looked at today, right? I would urge you to go back and revisit phrasal verbs concept, if conditional forms, not just limited to third conditional. Look at other forms as well. Second conditional, first conditional, what's the form? Because if I know the form and if a sentence starts with if, I'll be able to identify the error quickly, right? When it comes to infinitives, what are all the other verbs, right? We looked at a couple of words, right? Refused, perceived, ability. So what are all the other words usually where the form that follows is infinitive, right? So that's a good way of going back and applying what you've learned. Not just say, okay, this is what we learned in today's session, this is enough. No, you have to go expand your knowledge. You have to expand your knowledge on other phrasal verbs as well. We saw a handful of phrasal verbs, 5 phrasal verbs we have looked at, right? So there are so many phrasal verbs. Okay, so yeah, so do that, right? Go back, do your own learning as well. That is what is going to help you move forward. Yeah, because in these 2 hours, how much can we cover? This much only we could cover, 4 error types. Alright guys, so keep practicing, and I will see you guys in the next session. Okay, alright guys, bye, take care.